Introduction: A seemingly perfect marriage. Hides a mysterious past. From the outside, their marriage looked like a picture-perfect love story. Friends often envied their chemistry, their laughter, and the way they seemed to understand each other without saying a word. Family gatherings were always filled with warmth, and social media was filled with happy photos of vacations, anniversaries, and moments that spoke of a deep, unshakable bond. To the world, they were the ideal couple, the kind everyone wished they could be. She believed it too. For years, she lived in a comfortable bubble, trusting every word her husband said, feeling secure in the life they had built together. He was charming, kind, and attentive. He remembered anniversaries, surprised her with flowers for no reason, and supported her dreams without hesitation. Their love story seemed to have no cracks, no shadows, no hidden corners. But sometimes the heart notices things before the mind understands them. It started with small, almost invisible signs, moments when he became distant without reason, late-night phone calls that ended abruptly when she entered the room, occasional flashes of anxiety on his face when certain topics came up, topics he would quickly dismiss with a smile. She told herself not to overthink, to trust him like she always had. After all, every marriage had its ups and downs, right? Still, a quiet doubt began to grow in her. It was not born from jealousy or insecurity, but from a deep, instinctive feeling that something was not quite right. Sometimes she would wake up at night and find him sitting alone in the dark, staring at nothing, lost in thoughts he would never share. When she asked, he would simply kiss her forehead and tell her everything was fine. Everything was not fine. One afternoon, while cleaning the study, she stumbled upon a locked drawer in his desk, a drawer she had never noticed before. Something about it felt off. Innocent curiosity turned into a gnawing need to know what was inside. She tried to shake it off, telling herself that trust meant respecting his privacy. Yet the thought of that drawer haunted her every waking hour. She didn't want to become the kind of wife who snooped around, who doubted her partner. And yet, the love she had for him was now tangled with a fear she couldn't explain. What was he hiding? Was it something from his past? Something dangerous? Or was it something that could tear apart everything they had built together? Days turned into weeks, and the weight of not knowing became unbearable. She could feel the distance between them widening, an invisible wall growing taller with each passing day. The perfect life she thought she had suddenly felt fragile, as if one secret could shatter it all. And so, with a heavy heart and trembling hands, she made a decision. She had to find out the truth, no matter the cost. Because sometimes, the greatest danger lies not in the truth itself, but in the secrets we keep to protect the ones we love. The wife's suspicion, subtle signs, and odd behaviors make the wife curious and concerned. At first, she dismissed the uneasiness as mere imagination. After all, every marriage had its moments of distance, times when life's burdens made people act differently. But as days passed, the signs became harder to ignore. It began with his phone. Once so casual about leaving it lying around, he had suddenly grown protective of it. He would carry it everywhere, even to the bathroom. Whenever a message popped up, he would glance at it quickly, lock the screen, and tuck it into his pocket as if guarding it from curious eyes. If she asked who it was, he would answer vaguely, saying it was work stuff or nothing important. But his voice carried a tension she had never heard before. Then there were the changes in his routine. He started coming home late, often with weak explanations about last-minute meetings or traffic jams. When she offered to bring him dinner at his office, he politely but firmly declined, saying he didn't want to trouble her. Once or twice he claimed he was working overnight with colleagues, something that had never happened before in all their years together. And always, there was that shadow of unease in his eyes, a flicker of guilt he couldn't completely hide. The weekends, once their sacred time to relax and reconnect, also changed. He grew restless, constantly finding errands that pulled him away from home. Grocery shopping that used to be a joint activity became solo missions. Coffee dates turned into last-minute cancellations. When she suggested weekend getaways to reignite their bond, he would smile, agree enthusiastically, but never actually set a date. It wasn't just his actions, it was the way he looked at her. A little too carefully, as if weighing his words before speaking. The spontaneous laughter they once shared became forced and brittle. In quieter moments, she caught him staring at her with a strange sadness, almost as if he were silently apologizing for something she didn't yet understand. Her heart, once so full of trust, now wrestled with doubt. Was he hiding something? Was there another woman? The thought stung deeply, but she reminded herself not to jump to conclusions. Her husband had always been loyal, or at least she had believed he was, but if not an affair, then what? One evening, as he slept beside her, she found herself staring at his peaceful face, searching for answers. How could someone she loved so deeply suddenly feel like a stranger? How long had he been carrying this hidden burden? And why hadn't he trusted her enough to share it? The questions gnawed at her, louder with each passing day. She tried to silence them, tried to focus on the man she knew, or thought she knew. But the small, unexplained moments kept piling up, piece by piece, building a wall between them. A wall built not with arguments or anger, but with secrets. She didn't know it yet, but the truth waiting for her on the other side of that wall would change everything. Uncovering the clues, strange phone calls, late nights, and hidden documents surface. Her suspicion had now turned into quiet determination. She was no longer content with vague answers and forced smiles. If something was truly wrong, she needed to know, even if the truth hurt. The first real clue came one evening when he stepped outside to take a phone call. It wasn't unusual for him to receive work calls, but this time, something was different. His voice was low, tense, almost urgent. Through the slightly open window, she caught fragments of the conversation. Words like deadline, documents, and they can't find out. Fear flickered across her heart like a match being lit in a dry forest. When he returned inside, he wore a smile that didn't reach his eyes. He brushed off her questions, claiming it was just an urgent project at work. But she could tell he was lying. From that night on, she started paying closer attention. Patterns emerged. The late nights became more frequent, and when he did come home, he smelled faintly of cigarettes, even though he had never smoked a day in his life. Sometimes, there was a whiff of a perfume that wasn't hers clinging to his clothes, delicate and unfamiliar. He had new contacts saved under strange, generic names like Mark Supplies or D Legal, names she had never heard him mention before. Her heart pounded heavier each time she discovered a new inconsistency. It was during one of his late nights that she decided to search the house. She hated the feeling of invading his privacy, but she justified it by the fear gnawing at her soul. She started with his study. Everything looked normal, until she remembered the locked drawer she had found weeks earlier. Determined, she hunted for a key. It took time, but eventually, tucked inside an old shoebox in the closet, she found a small, rusted key that seemed out of place. With trembling hands, she inserted it into the drawer's lock, and it clicked open. Inside, she found a collection of documents, old letters, printed emails, and receipts from places he had never mentioned visiting. Some papers were in languages she couldn't even understand. There were also photos, grainy, hurried pictures of her husband standing with strangers, looking over his shoulder as if afraid of being seen. One folder, labeled simply "Confidential," caught her eye. It contained contracts, non-disclosure agreements, and references to organizations she had never heard of. Some of the names and dates suggested he had been involved in something long before they had even met. Panic rose within her as she realized how little she truly knew about the man she had vowed to spend her life with. As she sat there, documents spread around her, the house silent except for the ticking of the clock, a chilling thought took root in her mind. Whatever secret her husband was hiding, it wasn't just about betrayal. It was something bigger, something dangerous. And now that she had uncovered these clues, there was no turning back. Confiding in a friend. The wife shares her fears with a close confidant. Seeking advice. In the days that followed, she carried the weight of what she had discovered like a stone in her chest. Fear, anger, confusion, all tangled inside her, leaving her exhausted and sleepless. She knew she couldn't keep it bottled up any longer. She needed someone she could trust, someone who could help her make sense of this nightmare unraveling around her. There was only one person she could think of: her best friend, Sarah. Sarah had been in her life long before she met her husband. She was the one who had stood by her during college heartbreaks, family arguments, and even on her wedding day, calming her nerves. If anyone could offer her guidance now, it was Sarah. One afternoon, under the pretense of a casual coffee date, she met her at their favorite little cafe, a cozy place tucked away from the busyness of the city. As she stirred her untouched cup of coffee, her hands trembled slightly. She didn't know where to begin. How could she put into words the fear that her perfect life was built on a lie? Sarah, sensing something was wrong, reached across the table and touched her hand gently. "Hey, whatever it is, you can tell me." That small gesture broke the dam. In a hushed voice, she poured out everything: the secretive phone calls, the hidden documents, the feeling of being married to a stranger. Every word felt heavy, as if speaking them out loud made the situation even more real. She watched Sarah's face closely, searching for any sign of judgment, but found only concern. When she finished, silence hung between them for a moment. The cafe around them buzzed with life, the clinking of cups, the laughter of other customers, but to her, it all faded into a dull hum. Sarah squeezed her hand. "You're not crazy," she said firmly. "You're not imagining things. Something is definitely going on." Relief and fear twisted together inside her. It felt good to be believed, but it also meant that her instincts were right, and that terrified her. "What should I do?" she whispered, voice barely audible. Sarah thought for a moment. "First, you need to be careful. Whatever he's involved in, it sounds serious. You can't confront him without knowing the full picture. You need more information, and you need to protect yourself." She nodded, feeling a lump rise in her throat. "And whatever happens," Sarah added, "you're not alone. I'm here. We'll figure this out together." For the first time in days, she felt a small flicker of strength return. Maybe she couldn't face this alone, but with someone by her side, maybe she had a chance. Still, deep down, she knew uncovering the truth would come at a price, and she was about to pay it. The next steps would require courage she wasn't sure she had, but there was no going back now. Following the trail, she begins a private investigation into her husband's activities. The decision wasn't easy, but once made, it gave her a sense of purpose she hadn't felt in weeks. If she was ever going to regain control over her life, she needed to know exactly what her husband was hiding. Guesswork and suspicion wouldn't be enough. She needed hard evidence, facts that couldn't be twisted or denied. The first step was simple: observation. She started noticing the small things. The way he always stepped out to take certain calls, the odd hours he kept, the sudden, unexplained trips out of town. She kept a private journal, recording times, locations, and names mentioned in overheard conversations. What once seemed like scattered oddities slowly began to form a pattern. Sarah became her silent partner in this dangerous new mission. They spent evenings reviewing what little information she had gathered, trying to connect the dots. Together, they created a plan. If he was hiding something, there had to be places he frequented, people he met in secret. One evening, after he left claiming he had a late meeting, she decided to follow him. Heart pounding, hands shaking, she got into her car and tailed him at a safe distance. It felt surreal, like something out of a spy movie. She kept telling herself that she wasn't being paranoid, that she was simply seeking the truth she deserved to know. He drove across town, far from his office, and parked near an old, run-down building. From a distance, she watched him enter through a side door that didn't even seem to have a sign. She waited for over an hour, nerves fraying with every passing minute. When he finally reappeared, he wasn't alone. Two men in dark jackets walked out with him, speaking in hushed tones. Their body language was tense, almost urgent. She snapped a few photos with her phone, heart racing. this wasn't just a simple mistake or a private affair. Whatever he was involved in was bigger, more complicated, and possibly more dangerous than she had ever imagined. Later that night, pretending to sleep beside him, she hacked into his email. It was easier than she thought. He had used an old, familiar password. Her heart broke a little as she realized how much trust had already been lost. There, buried among mundane work emails, she found a thread, messages from someone named A. Malik, filled with cryptic references to shipments, payments, and warnings about staying low profile. Each message ended with the phrase, "No mistakes this time." What mistakes? What shipments? Her mind raced through terrible possibilities. Every new discovery brought her closer to the realization that her husband's secret wasn't just personal, it was criminal. As she sat alone, piecing the trail together, a chilling thought took root. She wasn't just fighting for her marriage anymore. She might soon be fighting for her safety and her future. The trail she had chosen to follow was dark, twisted, and dangerous, and it was only just beginning. A shocking discovery. Evidence points to a life she never knew, double life, hidden identity, or a dark past. She had braced herself for unpleasant truths, maybe an affair, maybe financial trouble, but nothing could have prepared her for what she was about to uncover. Late one night, after another silent dinner filled with half-truths and fake smiles, she found herself alone again, scrolling through the folders on his hidden email account. One attachment caught her attention, a scanned copy of an old passport. Curious, she zoomed in, and her heart nearly stopped. It was him. His face, his eyes, unmistakable. But the name was different, completely different. Not a misspelling or a typo, a whole other identity. Her husband, the man she thought she knew better than anyone else, had lived a life under another name. The discovery sent her spiraling into a panic. Who was he really? What had he done that forced him to abandon one identity and create another? She tried to think logically. People change names for many reasons: witness protection, running from danger, starting over. But the fear gnawing at her gut told her that this wasn't innocent. Desperate for answers, she dug deeper. With Sarah's help, they searched online databases, news archives, and public records, and that's when they found it. An old news article, almost 10 years old, from a different city, a place her husband had never even mentioned visiting. The headline read, "Financial consultant implicated in major fraud scandal disappears without a trace." The photo below was grainy, but there was no mistaking it. It was him, younger, thinner maybe, but unmistakably the man she had married. The article detailed how a trusted consultant had orchestrated a multi-million-dollar fraud scheme, stealing life savings from dozens of clients before vanishing without a trace. Authorities had searched for him for months, but he had seemingly vanished off the face of the earth. The case had eventually gone cold. Until now. Everything made sense in horrifying clarity. The secrecy, the locked drawers, the cryptic emails, the guarded phone calls. He hadn't just hidden a bad decision or a brief lapse in judgment. He had hidden an entire past life built on lies, betrayal, and crime. Her mind reeled. Was she living with a criminal? A fugitive? The man who tucked her in at night and laughed at her silly jokes, had he once destroyed countless lives with a pen stroke? Tears filled her eyes, but she forced herself to stay strong. She couldn't confront him yet, not without a plan. Now she understood why he was always looking over his shoulder, why he sometimes woke up sweating from nightmares he would never explain. The man she loved was a ghost wearing a mask, and now that she had uncovered the truth, she realized, knowing the secret was only the beginning. Surviving it would be the real challenge. The confrontation. Emotional and intense face-off between husband and wife. She couldn't sleep. The truth sat between them like a loaded gun, waiting to go off. For days, she rehearsed the confrontation in her mind, 1,000 versions of what she would say, how he might react, how it all might end. Fear and anger wrestled inside her, but in the end, her need for answers outweighed her fear. One evening, when he walked through the front door, she was ready. She sat calmly in the living room, The confidential folder spread out on the coffee table in front of her. The photos, the emails, the article, undeniable proof of the life he had hidden. He froze the moment he saw it. His face, usually so composed, crumbled in a flash of panic and dread. "Sit down," she said, her voice trembling but strong. He didn't argue. He dropped his bag to the floor and slowly sank into the armchair opposite her, his eyes dark with something between guilt and resignation. "Who are you?" she demanded, her voice cracking. "Because you're not the man I married." For a long moment he said nothing. His shoulders slumped, as if the weight of his secrets had finally become too much to carry. Then quietly, he spoke. "My real name is Daniel Cross," he said, barely above a whisper. "I changed it after everything fell apart." She felt like the ground beneath her was splitting open. "Why?" she choked out. "Why lie to me? Why drag me into this?" He leaned forward, his hands shaking. "I didn't want this life anymore. I ran because I was desperate, because I made mistakes I couldn't fix. I thought if I could start over, I could leave all of it behind." "You stole from people," she spat, unable to hold back the rising fury. "You ruined lives. Were you planning to ruin mine too?" "No!" he said sharply, his voice breaking. "I never lied about how I felt about you. You're the only real thing in my life. Everything else, it was survival." Tears blurred her vision. She wanted to believe him, wanted to cling to the love they had built. But how could she, when everything was built on a lie? "You had a choice," she said, standing up. "You could have told me. You could have trusted me. But instead, you let me build a life with a ghost." "I was protecting you," he whispered. "Protecting me from what?" she shouted. "The truth?" Silence stretched between them like a chasm too wide to cross. He lowered his head, defeated, while she struggled to hold herself together. Finally, she spoke, her voice hollow. "I don't even know who I'm married to anymore." And with that, she turned and walked away, leaving him sitting alone in the ruins of the life they had built, a life shattered not by fate, but by the secrets he had chosen to bury. The husband's confession. The truth is finally revealed. The silence in the house was suffocating. For days after the confrontation, they lived like two strangers under the same roof. Words hung heavy in the air, words that needed to be said, but neither dared to speak first. She was torn between anger and heartbreak, trying to decide whether to stay and listen or leave and never look back. Then, one night, he knocked softly on the door of the guest room where she had been sleeping. "Please," he said, his voice raw, "let me explain everything." Against her better judgment, or perhaps because a small part of her still needed closure, she nodded stiffly. He stepped inside, looking more broken than she had ever seen him. Sitting across from her, he began to speak, slowly at first, as if pulling each word from a deep, painful place. "I was a different man back then," he said. "Young, arrogant, and desperate to make a name for myself. I got involved with people who promised easy money, a chance to build something faster than hard work would ever allow." He paused, searching her face for any sign of softness. Finding none, he continued. "At first, it was small, minor fraud, fudging numbers to make clients happy. But then it grew, bigger than I ever imagined. When the authorities closed in, the people I worked for made it clear. Either I disappear or I take the fall for all of them. I didn't just run from my crimes. I ran for my life." He swallowed hard, his hands clenching into fists. "I faked my death. Started over. New name, new city. I thought if I stayed quiet, stayed clean, the past would stay buried." Tears filled her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. "All these years," she whispered, "you lived a lie." "No," he said urgently. "Not everything was a lie. Meeting you, loving you, that's the only real thing I've ever known. I wanted to tell you so many times, but every time I tried, I saw the fear in my own mind, the fear that you would look at me the way you're looking at me right now." For a moment, Neither of them moved. The air between them was thick with sorrow, regret, and something deeper. The realization that love, no matter how strong, couldn't erase a lifetime of secrets. "I wasn't protecting myself anymore," he said, voice trembling. "I was protecting you. If the people I ran from ever found me, if they found you, they wouldn't hesitate." A cold shiver ran down her spine. Suddenly, the paranoia, the guarded behavior, it all made a terrifying kind of sense. This wasn't just about betrayal. It was about survival. "But you lied," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "You chose for me." "I know," he said brokenly, "and I'll live with that guilt forever." Tears streamed down her face now, silent and unstoppable. She had asked for the truth, and now that she had it, it hurt more than all the lies combined. There were no easy answers anymore, only choices, hard, painful choices about what came next. The aftermath. How the revelation affects their relationship and trust. The days that followed his confession were a blur of emotions, anger, grief, confusion, and an aching emptiness she couldn't escape. It was as if everything familiar had been stripped away, leaving only the cold shell of the life she thought she knew. They moved around each other carefully, two wounded souls trapped in the same house, but living in entirely different worlds. Conversation became rare, reduced to basic necessities. "There's coffee. You have a call. I'll be late." Each word was heavy with everything left unsaid. For her, the greatest wound wasn't just his past. It was the betrayal of trust. The man she had chosen, the man she had built a future with, had made decisions about their lives without her consent. He had decided what truths she could handle. He had decided what dangers were worth exposing her to. He had stolen her right to choose. Every glance at him was a painful reminder of that betrayal. And yet, there were moments, fleeting, fragile moments, when she caught a glimpse of the man she had loved all along. The way he would still look at her when he thought she wasn't watching. The way he flinched when she pulled away from his touch. The way he seemed broken, too, not from being caught, but from losing her trust. Sarah remained her anchor during these chaotic days. "You have every right to walk away," Sarah told her gently one evening, "but don't stay just because of the past, and don't leave out of pride. Stay or leave because of what's right for you now." It was good advice, and it haunted her. Trust, she realized, was more fragile than love. Love could survive mistakes, misunderstandings, even terrible choices. But trust, once shattered, wasn't easily pieced back together. It demanded proof, consistency, time. Late one night, after hours of tossing and turning, she finally sat across from him again. "I don't know if I can forgive you," she said, her voice hoarse with exhaustion. "And I definitely don't know if I can ever trust you." He nodded, not trying to argue or defend himself. "I'll wait," he said simply, "as long as it takes." That somehow hurt even more, the quiet resignation in his voice, the knowledge that he might wait forever and still lose her. For now, she needed space. Space to heal, to think, to rediscover who she was outside of the lies she had been living in. So she packed a bag, just a small one, and walked out the door without another word. Not because she hated him, not because she wanted revenge, but because sometimes love isn't enough, not without trust to hold it together. And maybe, just maybe, if there was still a future for them, it would have to be built from the ground up, on truth this time. The decision. Will she forgive and rebuild, or walk away forever? She spent days alone, the silence of her apartment amplifying the noise in her mind. Every corner of their home, every object in it, seemed to carry the weight of the life they had shared. A life now fractured by a truth too overwhelming to ignore. She wasn't sure what she was looking for anymore. Peace, clarity, some sign that there was a way forward. But the only thing she could hear was the echo of her own thoughts, and they were full of questions. Could she forgive him? Could she ever trust him again after everything he had hidden from her? The man she had married was no longer the man she knew. The secret life he had been living, the lies, the manipulation, had shattered the foundation of their relationship. And yet, part of her still couldn't let go. Despite everything, she still felt the pull of the love they once shared, the connection that had been so real, so undeniable. Was that enough to rebuild on, or had the damage done been too great to ever truly fix? As the days turned into weeks, she found herself wrestling with the two sides of her heart. The one that wanted to walk away and never look back, and the one that still wanted to believe in the man who had once made her feel safe, loved, cherished. The phone calls from him became less frequent, and when he did call, it was always the same. "I'm waiting for you. Whenever you're ready." He had promised he would give her space, but she knew that he was still holding on to the hope that she would come back, that they could somehow find their way through the wreckage of their past. She thought of all the memories they had made together, the quiet moments, the laughter, the way his presence had once made her feel whole. She thought of the man he had been before all of this, before the lies, before the secrets. But the question remained, was it enough to make her stay? Could she forgive the man who had deceived her for so long? Could she forgive herself for allowing the lies to continue? The answer came unexpectedly, in the stillness of a quiet evening, as she sat staring out the window. It wasn't just about forgiving him, it was about forgiving herself for allowing herself to be blinded by love, for trusting someone without questioning the truth. And in that moment, she realized something crucial. She wasn't the same person she had been when she married him. She had changed. She had grown stronger, more independent. And perhaps that was the key. She had to decide whether the relationship was worth rebuilding, not because of the past they shared, but because of who they could become together or apart. The decision wasn't easy, and it wouldn't come quickly. She had to confront the truth of her own heart. In the end, the only thing she knew for sure was this: she wasn't going to make a decision based on fear. She wasn't going to let the past define her future. And most importantly, she wasn't going to rush. The road ahead might be uncertain, but whatever she chose, it would be her choice.